All right, what's going on, guys? Back for another of the Coinist Market Daily updates. Update and outlook, really, because we're going into a weekend where in the past 3 or 4 weekends, Arthur Hayes has described these as kill zones. If you're unfamiliar, that's not a technical term. It's a bit of a joke. But what's been happening is on Friday to Sunday when the CME is not trading, the CME exchange is a futures exchange that isn't open on Friday afternoon till Sunday night. It's not like crypto, which trades 24/7. It trades 24/5. And as that happens, price has gapped up considerably each weekend, right? So from Friday to Sunday, we've had explosive moves. This week is really kind of the first week where that didn't happen. The explosive move was actually happening earlier this week, obviously. But as we enter the weekend, it's a pretty exciting time for Bitcoin. First off, because that could happen again. Also, because the example that we looked at yesterday, right, the one comparison I wanted to make with Bitcoin, and I also made this on Twitter, we dove way deeper in the update yesterday, was how similar price looked yesterday to what happened at the beginning of June or end of May, right? Bitcoin at this resistance 8,400, breaking down, and then having two rules, either letting things drift lower and get a chance to buy the dip, or if price reclaims this previous area, which was resistance, and we broke down from, right? Resistance, 1, breakdown, 2, reclaim is 3, and then trend higher, right? So as soon as we reclaim, can jump back on and continue to run the trend higher, now understanding that the chance we move up is way higher, right? So that's what we talked about yesterday, looking at Bitcoin at this 11.4, 11.2 resistance. Step 2 is a breakout, then we have the breakdown, and then once again, this was kind of the trigger. We reclaim 11.4, what do? We trend higher, right? So already $1,000 higher. Love to see kind of Bitcoin playing out almost exactly as you draw it up, right? All you really have to do, and I talked about this yesterday, is going to continue to be a theme really every single day for me, and hopefully I can pass this along. It's so much less about predicting what's going to happen, but really just having some condition that you would like to see. If that condition is met, okay, execute, right? If this condition is met, meaning price moves above resistance, probably the likelihood that it actually moves higher now, that it can reclaim this resistance, is much greater. So you can jump back onto the trend and continue to ride it up. All right. You might notice I'm not on camera to start the stream today. I am filming this from a mobile office, I'm not at a normal office, so I don't have my camera set up and all that. So we're just going to jump right into things. What I want to cover now is Bitcoin going into the weekend, kind of outlook there. Yesterday we looked at the two scenarios being either we trend lower and you can buy 9,800, or we can reclaim, and that would allow you to kind of jump back on the trend with a lot more confidence. Today I want to talk about Bitcoin now that it has reclaimed and look to start to trend higher. Where could these resistances be where, let's say, maybe Bitcoin isn't able to make new highs? Let's say Bitcoin isn't able to get to the 13, 14K area, right? Where would I expect resistance? I want to talk about that. I'll point out some of those levels. The other thing I want to talk about is for those people that are long or have jumped back on, or let's say, you're in a Bitcoin trade, or let's say you're holding too much Bitcoin or anything, even if you're not, and you want to say, how do I make sure I'm not just stuck holding this if it does turn around and start to dump again? Where would you kind of be wrong on the idea? Invalidation points is what I call them. So we'll look at that as well, which is massively important. And then outside of that, the only other topic that I continue to bring up and continue to be so conservative on, although conservative is working very well lately, is alts, right? And just kind of stealing how I talk about this every single day, and something I repeat a lot. It's almost a meme now. I often say move slow, and we've looked at alts now for the past 2 or 3 or I would say almost 4 weeks now, which have really been a game that I think while Bitcoin is moving up this steady, I know everyone wants an alt season. I would love an alt season, but while Bitcoin is doing this, what's the hurry, right? So as long as Bitcoin continues to trend up and has such strength, I just don't see a window for a lot of alts to do well. We looked at yesterday, the only chance that I think alts have of doing well is if Bitcoin finally does hit some kind of resistance, whether it's 13, whether it's 14, whether it's right now, or whether it was yesterday. Bitcoin has to stop moving up so quickly and stop trending 5 or 10% every single day so that any alts could have kind of some breathing room, right? We looked at ADA and ETH yesterday, kind of drawing out some of these scenarios. If Bitcoin can stop trending up, then ETH, ADA, Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash, all those Bitcoin pairs could actually start to outpace Bitcoin. If Bitcoin doesn't stop moving up, I just don't see it being worth kind of taking those chances yet, right? And it's because, yes, the dollar value of those coins will move up, but they will not outpace Bitcoin. So if they're not outpacing Bitcoin, Bitcoin is generally going to be the lower risk for a wide range of reasons, and it's also performing better, right? So Bitcoin continues to kind of be the main focus. Alts are always going to be an after shadow when Bitcoin is doing this. Once again, I'll talk about kind of the scenario after we cover Bitcoin. What would Bitcoin have to do for those alts to do well? I think Bitcoin has to hit a resistance and stay at that resistance for a meaningful amount of time, right? Something like 2 or 3 days, something like a week, right? The only time that alts have been able to do well since May has been like May 14th through May 25th. And you'll notice Bitcoin was stuck at a resistance level for a week, right? Yesterday we had Bitcoin stuck at a resistance level for maybe 24 hours. So, if you are taking chances on altcoins, the only things that I kind of drew up were ETH and ADA and a few yesterday. If you are, I just think it makes sense to, if you're going to take 1 or 2, maybe small positions, or maybe make sure you kind of have your risk management tight, or if it's a longer term investment, just understand that they'll probably underperform Bitcoin, at least in the short term, right? Anyways, let's jump into this. Once again, apologize that you can't see my beautiful face. Sometimes, for some people that actually might be better. So anyways, let's dive into Bitcoin, and then I'll cover the alts to prep everyone for the weekend. And obviously we'll have an update tomorrow as well. The only last note is apologies that this isn't getting out sooner. Being on the go this weekend definitely makes it a bit of a challenge in terms of getting this off in time, but hopefully this still preps you for the weekend quite well. All right. So price at 11.4. Once again, reviewing the quick plan, now we'll look at where we are today. Bitcoin was at resistance. Looking at that fractal from May and early June, Bitcoin was at this 11.4 resistance. This is the area we broke up from before we had this parabolic rise, which obviously led to the 20% decline. I think everyone's familiar with that, right? That's why when we looked at 2 scenarios yesterday, right, there's 2 plans, and I'll put a 1 here for what the first plan was, which was price reclaiming that level, and that would give me such higher conviction or a way greater probability or a way greater likelihood that we were going to be able to continue higher, right? That's why I don't want to jump in right there. Other scenario was price trending down to 9,800, right? So when I think about price action yesterday, and I swear I'm going to get to today, we were breaking down. I think we were trading at 11.1, whatever it was. For me, as this dip's happening, rather than trying to pick whether or not this is the dip and that we actually do turn around and trend higher, or whether this was kind of the top and now we do, trend lower, you're going to be right. If you're just guessing, or if it's just a coin flip, you'll be right 50% of the time. If you have a very good edge and you're very good at understanding kind of the macro, maybe you'll be right 70-30 or 60-40 on direction. If I am jumping back into longs for a Bitcoin bull run and kind of a Bitcoin rise that's been pretty violent, and I do think there's quite a bit of risk with jumping onto anything that's been up so much, I generally kind of want to have a high level of confidence if I'm going to be doing that, right? So why would I want to buy something that's slightly higher? The only reason I'd want to do that is to have kind of a way higher chance of that trade being successful, or to have a way higher chance of being right on the direction. So the plan yesterday was, if price can reclaim, right? I like to use 4-hour closes or daily closes. I think Bitcoin is moving so fast right now that even 1-hour closes kind of make sense. Why do I use those higher time frame closes? It's so that I'm not sitting here and staring at a 15-minute and trying to pick which wick is actually a breakout, right? Generally, if you're using like a 4-hour candle or an hour candle or whatever it might be, it gives you a little bit more it kind of filters out the noise, and I think the candle closes are slightly more significant in the fact that if the 1 hour, the daily, or the 4-hour closes through a level, you can kind of understand that demand is actually strong enough to not just wick through, but to actually maintain price trading above that level. Right, so as price moves below 11.2 yesterday, we have the breakdown, and then plan 1, right? Price reclaims this area we broke down from, which means we were strong enough to once again get over this whole resistance that we were stuck at, and that led to a very nice breakout. Right, so once again, pretty much the same thing is happening right after we reclaim 11.4 or 11.6 when it happened. Price has now moved up nearly $600-700. Now it kind of gets me to to what to expect this weekend. And once again, I'm never really going to try to predict. I don't think that adds too much of an edge to anyone's game. Obviously, you can have a bias in terms of what direction you think we're going to continue to head. But what I try to do with every single position I'm in, or if I'm just analyzing a chart and not in a position, is understand where would I be right? Where would I want to be taking profits on a certain player? Where would I expect selling pressure to step in? And then also, where would I be wrong? Right? Where would I get stopped out, or where would I want to jump out of this thing if kind of the trend stops moving in my favor? The high time frame and kind of very slow moving approach to this, I would say that as long as this area, right, resistance 11.2, as we moved up into it, we break out and trend higher, right? Once again became resistance again. Now we're above it and trending higher. The very slow moving approach, if you're just kind of an investor, you're not in a leveraged long, you're just looking for kind of the weekly, daily, monthly type moves that the trend resumes. Right, as long as price is still trading above this 11.4 area, right? So this is kind of my invalidation, right? It was resistance, support, resistance, support again as we kind of get back above it. As long as price is trading above 11.4, I do like long exposure to Bitcoin, right? The trend is up. I know things are a bit ridiculous right now. They're nearly still parabolic. But this area now is kind of my new invalidation, the same way it was an invalidation just a few days ago. Right? It's a resistance we've broken out of, led to an explosive move. It's a resistance once again we broke out of, which has led to a $600 or $700 move. And as long as price can maintain that level, it's the exact same rule set I've used for nearly 2 or 3 months now, since April. Right? Every single time we can kind of get above a level, thinking back to 8,400 in early June, right? We reclaim 8,400. My only thought is, okay, we're trending higher. The only time that I wouldn't want to be long again is if we get back below 8,400. And you just watch price kind of run away from that level. Obviously, it would be wrong if price got back below 8,400, but it didn't. Right? So now I'm looking at that exact same scenario. Now that we're above 11.4, really as long as price is trading above 11.4, I don't care what it looks like. It could go like that again. It could do this. It could go straight up. Right? As long as we're above 11.4, that's kind of my new invalidation level that I would like to see price trading above. Right? So I prefer to stay long above 11.4. If I'm thinking about where I could be targeting, right, where you could be taking profit if you're in a Bitcoin long, let's say you did jump in yesterday as we reclaim 11.4, where do you think we could expect some selling pressure? The areas that stick out to me, first off, are going to be pretty much 12.9, right? We finally have a few levels to work with here. Finally have a few levels to work with. As we've been moving up for the past 2 or 3 months, it's almost been in price discovery. We have some levels back from 2018, but not a lot to work with. So now that Bitcoin's actually made a move above where we're trading currently, you actually can kind of pick out some resistance areas. The first one being this 12.9 or 13K area. I think that makes sense as a resistance. You can see it's really kind of the last area that price struggled to get above before the final breakout. And then once again, as we move back down below, resistance we tap before kind of the violent sell-off. So I think 13K, right? If you jump back in after price reclaim this level, I think that makes a ton of sense, right? If, we face selling pressure here, I'd like fading out there, even if we don't, right? And then once again, exact same kind of approach at 11.2. Let's say price starts to trend above 13K, or price can reclaim this level, right? Hourly close, 4-hour close, daily close, whatever it might be, right? Okay. If that happens, I'm now kind of expecting we make the run to 14.4 or 14.7. So 13K is kind of really the only next high time frame line in the sand that I like as kind of a selling point. So other than that, I think right now we're kind of playing in this range of 11.4 is kind of that support. If we do come back down and retest this area, right, retest it as support, this is where I think that support steps in. It's also the invalidation level. If price moves down too much, 11.4 is where I'd be wrong. And if we continue to move up, this is kind of that selling pressure. If we break out of 13K, I would once again expect kind of another pretty violent push higher. Right, so that's the Bitcoin outlook, guys. Yesterday, I love to kind of see the comparison work out almost perfectly from breakdown or resistance, breakdown, reclaim, trend higher. Right, it's the exact same kind of pattern that worked out. if you didn't jump in long, the only thing I really have to say, or let's say you're not exposed to Bitcoin enough, or you don't own enough Bitcoin, or you're saying, wow, do I buy now? Is it too late? The only thing I'll say, and I've said this maybe every single 2 days for the past 4 weeks, is Bitcoin will always give more opportunities. Back at 5,500, I remember people were saying, man, I missed that last, strong breakout from 55 to 8K. I'm never going to get another $2,000 or $1,000 breakout, right? A week later, 8,400 happens. Oh man, I missed the 3K breakout. A week later, 11K happens. Oh man, I missed there's always going to be another swing. Even just yesterday, we have this 20% drawback. Reclaim this level. Okay, $1,000 swing. Bitcoin is giving so much action right now that if let's say you missed your entry, you don't feel comfortable buying now, whatever it might be, you're dying for a Bitcoin trade, you're not in enough, anything like that, I'd be patient. There will always be another swing. I'll obviously do my best to kind of identify the condition or the setup, and there will always, always, always be another swing. So move slow. No need to jump and rush into anything right now and say, oh man, we're going to 14K, or oh man, I missed out on this pump. There will always be another trade. There will always be a retracement. There's always going to be another swing. Right? Market is not going anywhere. All right, guys, that's Bitcoin. I'm aiming for 13. Above 13, I think we move a lot higher. 11.4 is how I'm managing risk. That goes for anyone. If you're in spot, even if you're not in a Bitcoin trade, right, below 11.4, below 11.2, I'd be a little bit worried that price actually does take a much steeper correction. You have to remember we're not above this most recent parabolic run. This could be a lower high. Right, so let's say like a lower high is put in. Where would this be really scary? I think it'd be really scary kind of below 11.4, 11.2. If that happens, then we actually probably do make it down to 9,800. Right? So if you're long, if you're up, whatever it might be, I don't think it's a time you can really get complacent if you're trading Bitcoin. Even if it is a nice $700 swing, I would still be thinking about where you're wrong on that. Regardless of whether or not you use my levels, it's important. All right, that's Bitcoin. Bitcoin is continuing to dominate the trend. What this is doing, and we had alt bounces for all of 24 hours, what this is doing is any of these alts that bounced, let me get my nasty drawings out of here. Any of these alts that have bounced are once again making new lows, right? So the idea that I've kind of talked about, and I'm going to do my best to phrase it in a different way so it's not repetitive each day, is let's say you're looking at ETH or you're looking at ADA or you're looking at any alt right now, right? I like to look at major alts right now because if Bitcoin does stop moving, or if alts do start to have some life, right? A lot of people are saying, is this alt season? I want to swing from the bottom. I want to jump in. Am I going to be too late? All these things. The way that I'm thinking about this, and the way that I've tried to explain it, and I think this helps some people, is let's say that this is literally the bottom. I've said this now for 4 days in a row. Let's say this is literally the exact bottom for ETH, the exact bottom for all these alts, for ADA, for Litecoin, for whatever alt you're trying to swing, right? What would need to happen for these alts to do quite well? You have to think this is a Bitcoin pair. So in order for ETH, Bitcoin, or ADA, or any of the alts you trade on Binance to do well, right, it would need to outpace Bitcoin since it's being priced in Bitcoin. So for Bitcoin, what kind of action would you need to see out of Bitcoin in order to increase the likelihood of that happening? You'd kind of need to see Bitcoin stop moving up 10 or 20%, right? It's up 10% on the day. So, while a lot of people are saying, this is going to be the bottom for alts, if you're not scaling in right now, you're going to miss out on this huge pop. The other way that I think about it is when alts do well, the same way of when they do bad, it tends to last for 2 to 3 to 4 weeks, 1 week at a minimum, maybe even a month or two, right? The notable alt seasons, or alt windows, as I like to call them, for the last 6 months to a year, you can think of January or December, almost all the way through February, right? So that was like a 2 or 3 month. The other time was like April of 2018 through pretty much the end of May 2018. You also have December of last year through pretty much February of last year. It almost always lasts for at least a week to 2 or 3 weeks. So let's say that this is literally the bottom, kind of getting back to the key example of ETH or any alt you're looking at. In the event this is literally the bottom, and let's say ETH and everything have a nice 10, 15, 20% bounce tomorrow, right? Even if that does happen, right, the amount of upside that I would miss out on just by missing that first day of bounce is maybe 5, 10, 15%, whatever it might be, on 1 or 2 trades, right? And then if alts continue to do well, because this is the bottom, right? Let's say they continue to do well for a week or a month or whatever it might be, you missed out. Like if you look at kind of the last time they did well, which was May 30th as Bitcoin hit, or May 14th as Bitcoin hit resistance, this pop was 35%. Now, even if you were a full 24 hours late and every single alt was up, 20%, 15% and bouncing and Bitcoin was at resistance and you jumped in after, you maybe missed out on 10% of upside, but your downside capture or the risk of jumping into those alts after they were all actually doing good is so much lower. It kind of goes back to exactly what we just did with Bitcoin today and yesterday, of waiting for a level to be reached or waiting for your condition to be met, right? What was the condition? Price has to get back above this area. It has to reclaim this resistance. So I think we were trading somewhere in here yesterday. Even though you're buying $400 higher, right? The chance that you were right is got to be at least 50% higher. I don't have it quantified. I don't have this exact setup quantified. But you can kind of see what I mean of, let's say you jump into alts yesterday because you start to see people posting them on Twitter, or you see, for 6 hours, they're up 5% and you start to get excited, you FOMO in. That's happened like 10 out of the last 14 days. Alts have 5% bounces and then they find new lows, 5% bounces and then they find new lows, right? So I still think I'm personally still being patient on all these alts. I think even if they bounce, right? This is a bit extreme to say, but I almost don't want to catch the bottom, right? Because I would much rather see them all bounce, have every single alt on my watch list be up 5 or 10%, right? And have Bitcoin be at a resistance, and then say, you know what? Okay, this condition actually makes sense. Bitcoin is at resistance, right? I think that gives alts a chance to actually trend higher, right? Let's say like May 13th, May 14th, Bitcoin's at resistance. It can't break through this level and it's just kind of ranging and all alts are doing well. It would give me such higher conviction that my trades are going to be right. I would actually be able to take 2 or 3 trades and hold them for longer than 24 hours. And I think alts would just do well as a whole, right? I only want to be exposed to alts if the entire group of alts or entire group of coins is doing well. And if they're not, right, what's the rush? You're literally being paid by waiting when the trend is down for these alts. So the only flip side to that is I don't want to dissuade anyone that is trying to play alts right now. By all means, go for it. Eventually this will turn, right? And when it does turn, it will be a violent bounce. All I'm saying is for the vast majority of people, especially for people that aren't day trading and jumping out of a position 1 or 2 or 3 times a day, it just probably doesn't make sense. You want to be playing daily, weekly, monthly trends, right? You don't want to be on the computer for 7 hours a day and trying to understand where your stop should be and whether or not, you're up 6 or 7%. You want to be on the monthly, weekly, those kind of trends, right? So that's really my only thought for ETH and for every single alt. That literally goes for every single alt. I can show a million other charts. I can show XRP. I can show Tron. I can show anything, right? I mean, this is still the trend. Things are still continuing to move lower. If you're looking at any alt on a 1 hour or 4 hour and it looks attractive, I would just kind of urge you to zoom out, look at a daily, look at a weekly, and say, is it still making lower lows, lower highs? What's the condition I would need to see for this alt to do better than Bitcoin? Right? It probably involves Bitcoin being at a resistance, and then it involves all other alts kind of moving up with it. Right? So that's still my only thought for alts. I know that I've saved a heap of money. There was only 2 trades I even tried to take for alts earlier in the month. It was Fetch after June 1st. Fetch was a very nice trade, and that resulted in a 5 or 6% loss. We talked about this one on stream. Right? It's already down another 40%. Like, I just still kind of don't see, they're going to go through their capitulation, and around the corner, alts are going to be a massive trade. They're going to be a great trade. I just don't want to rush it. I don't think there's a rush yet. Right? So the focus, just to wrap things up, is still on Bitcoin. I think if you're playing alts and you're a trader, you're a short-term player, I think it can make sense. The only thing I want you to think about is, what's my increased upside, right? What's my marginal upside by jumping in? Let's say it's literally the bottom as I'm talking. What's my increased kind of bonus or win or profit by being in from the literal bottom? And then also, what's the amount of risk I'm taking on that? Like, what's the probability you're right and this is literally the bottom? Versus waiting for them to actually confirm and trend higher for a full day and then jump in. How much upside are you actually missing? Maybe 10 or 20% on one trade. but your risk is so much lower because now it's the expectation that alts can actually continue to trend higher. Right, so that's really the only thought for alts. I know alts continue to get thrown around a ton when Bitcoin's really stealing the show. To wrap it up with Bitcoin, right, as long as 11.4, 11.3 is holding, I want to be exposed to Bitcoin. The condition was met. If Bitcoin does trend up and we get stuck here, right, this to me is at least a take profit or a fade spot. If we get above it, sure, it could open up the kind of the window for another swing, but I think 13K makes sense for some resistance. 11.4 right now is our support. It's also the area that I'd be wrong if price starts to move below. So that's all I have for Bitcoin. For alts, guys, for alts, it's still a very patient play. I just don't see the risk reward there right now. Soon, right? It's right around the corner, maybe the end of the month, maybe early July, but it's just not there yet. Bitcoin has to stop doing so well. For Bitcoin, the theme continues to be, I want to be exposed to the trend as much as I can, right? And the second that that trend is over, in this case, it would be Bitcoin moving back below the level that was just kind of the trigger. If we get back below this level, right, then once again, I think kind of the trend is over. I would at least be waiting in cash or hedged, or at least take some off the trade. However you want to think about it is different for everyone, because the likelihood that if we break down below this level, we probably move lower is a lot higher. All right, that's all I have, guys. Should be an exciting weekend again. We'll see. Tomorrow's stream will be back at the normal time, 2:30 p.m. That's all I have. I'll be back on my desk. And have a good weekend, guys. Enjoy your Fridays. Hopefully you're enjoying the new format of the letters. That's all I got. Stay well. Have a good Friday. Peace.